At 73 years old, George Strait is once again making headlines not for a sold-out tour, a new hit song, or another award, but for something far more emotional. This time, the news touches not just George Strait, but all of America. It appears that George Strait is planning to retire for good. When he first announced his retirement from touring in 2014, fans were heartbroken. After decades of singing and performing, it was understandable. His body wasn't the same as it used to be. Still, he continued to release music and perform occasionally, holding on to his passion and connection with fans. In mid-2025, during a heartfelt moment with fans in Philadelphia, George opened up. He reminded them that he had been performing for 50 years and cherished every single moment on stage. The joy of seeing his fans happy gave him the drive to keep going. But he also acknowledged the toll it had taken. Then came the announcement that sent shockwaves through the crowd. He revealed that he likely wouldn't be performing for much longer. In about 5 years, he said, he might have to step away from music entirely, but he would never forget his fans. By the time he's 78, or at most 80, George Strait plans to retire from the stage for good. Despite that, fans still have time to enjoy his music. In 2024, he released a new album titled Cowboys and Dreamers. The year before, he launched a series of one-off stadium shows each summer and has bookings extending through 2026. George has always honored his performance schedule. In mid-2024, he took the stage at Kyle Field in College Station, Texas. The excitement for the show was overwhelming. Fans kept buying tickets, unaware of just how historic that concert would become. Even at his age, George Strait was magnetic. His voice remained powerful, and he commanded the crowd with ease. Over 110,000 fans attended that performance, making it the largest ticketed concert for a single act in U.S. history. Although young artist Zach Bryan eventually broke that record in 2025, George's legacy remained untouched in recognition of his legendary status. George Strait was inducted into the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 2024 for the 2025 class. He stuck to his schedule, performing at Gillette Stadium on June 21, 2025. And was set to perform at the Las Vegas HBCU Classic in October. Another performance was scheduled for 2026, but everything changed on September 10, 2025. That day, headlines broke again, this time due to tragic news involving Charlie Kirk, the American right-wing political activist, entrepreneur, and media figure, who was shot and killed. One of the most prominent voices in the MAGA movement, and a leading figure among conservative youth, Charlie Kirk co-founded Turning Point USA in 2012 and served as its executive director. Through this organization, he aimed to engage with college students across the country, using debates to promote conservative ideologies and recruit young people into the Republican Party. While Charlie had a passionate following, he was also a deeply polarizing figure. Critics accused him of being a racist and a divisive force in American politics. Many claimed he manipulated statistics in his arguments and used his platform irresponsibly. Despite numerous threats, Charlie remained steadfast in his mission, fully aware that his work had made him enemies. On September 10, 2025, during one of his campus appearances at Utah Valley University, Charlie was leading a debate focused on mass shootings when the unimaginable happened. Shots rang out, and a bullet struck him in the neck. Blood poured as chaos erupted around him. Though emergency responders rushed him to the hospital, the damage was too severe. Charlie Kirk died that day. Investigations later revealed that his killer was someone who harbored deep resentment toward him and his message. Though many suspected deeper political motivations behind the assassination, the reactions across the country were sharply divided. Some people shockingly celebrated his death, claiming his views and rhetoric had harmed many. Others were horrified by such reactions, calling them inhumane and disgraceful. Regardless of where people stood, America collectively paused. Tributes poured in from prominent figures around the world, recognizing the impact, positive or negative, that Charlie had made on the political landscape. Among the many tributes, one stood out. At 73, George Strait could have quietly remained at home, far removed from political discourse or public tragedy. He had already done more than enough for the world: countless shows, albums, and a career marked by dignity and grace. But Charlie's death hit George on a personal level. It stirred memories of his own painful past, of grief that he rarely shared publicly. To express that emotion and offer solidarity with Charlie's grieving family, George turned to the one thing that had always helped him process pain: music. But this time, George didn't release a single or promote a song. He waited until Charlie's funeral. On that somber day, in front of 90,000 mourners, George took the stage, guitar in hand. When he sang, it wasn't just a performance. It was raw grief transformed into melody. His voice carried sorrow deeper than lyrics could explain. The crowd stood silent, many in tears, as his music gave voice to the pain they couldn't express. It wasn't a song yet. It was a farewell, a tribute, and a collective cry for comfort in a moment of national heartbreak. George's performance became more than just a tribute to one man. It gave people a way to grieve, to connect, and to begin healing. He reminded everyone that mourning isn't a weakness. It's what makes us human. Even icons, even the strongest among us, carry sorrow. George, despite all his fame and poise, showed the world that you can be broken and still stand tall enough to hold others through their pain. But as the nation began to heal, questions remained about George himself. Would he be okay? George Strait is no stranger to tragedy, though he rarely speaks of it. He's always been known for his calm, quiet demeanor, never loud, never flashy. Fame never changed him. He never chased controversy or sought to dominate headlines. He focused on what mattered to him: his family, his music, and his fans. He preferred to let his songs do the talking, although songs have made him unforgettable. Still, there's a part of George that holds pain most people will never know. He's always kept his personal struggles private, choosing not to wear his heart on his sleeve. But some grief can't be buried forever. Some wounds remain open, even if they're hidden. And for George, there was one loss in particular, a secret sorrow that continued to ache beneath the surface. He never spoke about it much, but it shaped him, shaped his music, and shaped the man he became. George Strait had always kept his personal life private, choosing to protect his family from the scrutiny that comes with fame. Many believe this was simply out of respect and discretion. But now, there's reason to wonder if George wasn't just protecting his family. Maybe he was also shielding himself, trying to outrun a grief too painful to face. When he finally opened up, fans were stunned. They had always seen George as unshakable, a towering figure in country music, someone who carried others through their darkest times. No one expected that he, too, needed to be carried. The weight he'd been bearing started long before the fame and the sold-out arenas. Back in 1971, George ran away to Mexico with his high school sweetheart, Norma. The following year, they welcomed their first child, Jennifer. Their son, George Harvey Strait Jr., was born in 1981, the same year George's music career took off with the hit Unwound. Just a year later, Foolhardy Memory reached #1 on country radio, and George became a household name. It seemed like everything was coming together: his family by his side, his career on the rise. Life was full of promise. But then came the night that would change everything. Jennifer, then a teenager, went out with friends. The driver was going too fast and misjudged a turn. The car flipped. Jennifer, who wasn't wearing a seatbelt and was seated by an open window, was thrown from the vehicle and died. She was the only one who didn't survive. The accident shattered George's world. In the aftermath, George all but disappeared from the spotlight. He stopped giving interviews. He didn't speak about Jennifer publicly. He poured his energy into his work and his remaining family, burying the pain behind a wall of silence. While his fame was skyrocketing, inside he was hollowed out by grief. But he couldn't stop. Contracts had to be fulfilled. Concerts had to be performed. His career, a dream come true, became a kind of cage. There was no space for mourning when the show had to go on. Over time, George began to find small ways to heal. In 1987, he and Norma created the Jennifer Strait Memorial Foundation. The nonprofit, funded by close friends and fans, supports children's charities in the San Antonio area. A year later, George released Baby Blue, a tender, mournful ballad about loss. Though he never confirmed it publicly at the time, many fans believed the song was about Jennifer. In 2005, he admitted that his song "You'll Be There" reminded him of his daughter. But George never shared these things for sympathy. He spoke about them to show that beneath the legend was a man quietly carrying pain. And by sharing it, he wanted to let others know they weren't alone. That honesty changed how people saw George Strait. He was no longer just a country icon. He became a symbol of strength in the face of heartbreak, someone who knew suffering but continued to move forward. Still, George hadn't told the full story. Another chapter of sorrow weighed on him: the loss of his older brother, John. John Strait was found dead in a hotel room. At first it was reported he died of natural causes, but the autopsy revealed a different truth. Methadone, toxicity, and heart failure. It was another devastating blow, another wound that George kept quiet about. It added to the invisible burden he carried all these years. Despite the fame, the awards, and the glory, George Strait's life has been marked by quiet battles and deep personal losses. Yet he's never used them for attention. He's never asked to be pitied. Instead, he's used music to process pain, to connect with others, and to remind people that even legends bleed, that even kings of country cry. And perhaps that's what makes George Strait truly unforgettable. Not just the voice, not just the legacy, but the humanity behind it all. The death of George Strait's brother was yet another heartbreak in a life already marked by painful loss. Still, despite everything he's endured, George has never turned inward or grown bitter. Instead, he's used his pain as a source of compassion, always showing up for those who are suffering. It's as if his own losses created a vow within him, one that promised no one around him would have to go through pain alone if he could help it. That vow was evident once again during the catastrophic floods that hit Texas's Hill Country in July 2025. The floods destroyed homes, claimed lives, and left families with nothing. The grief was overwhelming. In the middle of that devastation, George didn't stay silent or on the sidelines. He stepped in to help. He organized Straight to the Heart, a benefit dinner and concert to raise money for the victims. Tickets sold out fast, and he raised $6.25 million to help families rebuild their lives. His actions inspired others to give, and his message to the victims was simple but powerful: they were not alone. Moments like these are why people don't just call George Strait a country legend, they call him a true human being. He didn't follow the typical road to becoming a star. In fact, his original dream wasn't country music at all. Growing up, George was more into the Beatles and British invasion rock. He even joined a garage rock band called the Stoics. He bounced from one band to another, chasing the energy and sound of rock and roll. But as he matured, his musical tastes started to shift. The countless country music shows across Texas caught his attention. Slowly, his interest in country grew, not from listening to the radio, but from watching live performances. His family's ranching lifestyle meant he mostly tuned in to the news and farm reports, not music. It wasn't until after high school, when he joined the military and was stationed in Hawaii, the music became something more. There in Hawaii, he discovered the Army-sponsored band, Rambling Country. He auditioned, joined, and began performing for fellow soldiers. Under the stage name Santi, he also began playing for local crowds. The more he performed, the more he evolved. Everyone who saw him agreed George Strait had real talent. The question was, would he be able to do anything with it? After his honorable discharge from the Army in 1975, George returned to Texas with new purpose. He enrolled at Southwest Texas State University, now Texas State University, to study agriculture. But then he saw a flyer. A country band called Stony Ridge was looking for a vocalist. He auditioned, got the role, and eventually renamed the band Ace in the Hole. His voice stood out, and before long, he became the lead singer. The band started small, playing local bars across East and West Texas. Slowly, they gained a reputation and even began opening for nationally known acts. When the Houston-based label D Records gave them a chance to record, George wrote the songs himself. But despite all their hard work, the songs didn't make much of an impact. D Records passed on continuing with them. The opportunity they had hoped would launch their career fizzled. They were back to square one. Even so, George didn't give up. To support his family, he started working on the family cattle ranch. But music was still in his blood. Then came a turning point. George connected with Irv Woolsey, the owner of one of the bars they played at. Irv had experience in the music industry and believed George deserved a real shot. He used his connections to get Nashville executives to come and hear George and the band perform live. The execs were impressed by the performance, but they weren't sure if George's Western swing style would sell. They walked away without signing him. That rejection hit hard. George had come so close again, it felt like it would never happen. Discouraged and out of options, he told the band he was quitting music and took a job designing cattle pens. But his wife Norma knew he wasn't ready to give up. She encouraged him to try just one more time. And that one final attempt changed everything. In February 1981, MCA Records agreed to sign George for a single, just one. If it did well, they'd talk about an album. It was a high-pressure moment, but George was no stranger to pressure. With his wife's encouragement and everything he had left to give, he recorded Unwound. The song became a massive hit, climbing to number 6 on the Billboard Hot Country Songs chart. That was the breakthrough. MCA saw his potential and gave him the green light for a full album. That moment marked the true beginning of George Strait's legendary career. A career that has now spanned more than 50 years, full of chart-topping hits, sold-out shows, personal heartbreaks, and public triumphs. And through it all, George remained grounded. He never chased the spotlight for fame's sake. He just kept showing up on stage, in service, and in sorrow, always letting the music speak for.